17th century Britain saw an era of war, bloodshed, as well as social, economic, political and religious reform. This video will give a brief overview of the period from 1625 to 1660. In 1625, Charles I ascended to the throne after his father James I's death. Charles I believed heavily in divine right, which is the belief that he has the God-given right to rule over the British Isles. This meant that Charles I was heavily autocratic and did not care for Parliament. Between the period 1625 to 1629, Charles had abolished Parliament 3 times. After the assassination of Duke of Buckingham in 1628, to which Parliament celebrated, Charles closed them down and began to rule independent of them. This is also known as the 11 Years of Tyranny. During this time, Britain also began to compete on an international scale, growing the empire and founding Maryland in North America in 1632, the same year that Charles II assigned Laud as Archbishop of Canterbury. Throughout this period, there was a growing fear of Catholicism, and Laud was an Arminian, which was seen as the midpoint between Protestantism and Catholicism. Charles displayed sympathy to the Arminian and allowed them to gain positions of power, which raised suspicion of the more conservative Protestants. During the 11 Years of Tyranny, Charles had to find a way to generate money in the stead of Parliament. He used methods such as ship tax. However, by 1639, with the outbreak of the Bishops' War in Scotland, which occurred as a result of the English changing the Lord's Prayer, Charles was forced to put down this revolt and therefore reopen Parliament to do so. Parliament tried to prevent the 11 Years of Tyranny occurring again through offering the Triennial Act in exchange for their financial support of the war. With the outbreak of the Second Bishops' War, Charles accepted. However, this did not mean he stuck to it, and as a result of his autocracy came the English Civil War. This saw the Roundheads, also Parliament, against the Cavaliers, also known as the Royalists. The Civil War saw a rise of the prominence in women in Britain. With the men away at war, women had to run businesses and help supply the war. The Roundheads were much more religiously conservative than the Royalists, and were Puritan, which back then was the most extreme form of Protestantism. The opposition to the king saw the founding of the new model army led by Oliver Cromwell. This army was overbearing for the Royalists, and the Civil War saw the win for the Parliament. Eventually, Charles II was taken to court, accused of high treason, and executed. Now saw the beginning of the Republican rule, and the Rump Parliament. This period saw the rise and growth of London, which became the most populous city of Western Europe, and the centre of trade and power in England. Moreover, the religious freedom given by the newfound Republican state led by the Puritans allowed for the merchants to travel into Britain, strengthening the economy. However, this period also saw the rise of what was perceived back then as religious radical groups, such as the Quakers and Baptists, which left issues for future leaders. 1653 saw the failure of the Rump Parliament, with heavy involvement of the army. Politics and military collided, and these politicians became figureheads, uttering nothing but the desires of the army. In order to combat this, saw the founding of the Protectorate state, which saw Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protectorate of Great Britain. He held similar power to that of Charles I. The irony here is that Cromwell was seen as a key figure in ending the autocracy of Charles, just to hold a similar level of power. Cromwell ruled with absolute authority, however was not seen as a charismatic king by the general people, as they had viewed previous monarchs. This is mainly because he did not have the same legitimacy of these monarchs. Despite this, in 1657 he was in fact offered the throne, however due to his Puritan ideology, rejected it in fear that it would upset God. After his death in 1658, his son Richard Cromwell succeeded him. Richard Cromwell was unexperienced and incapable of ruling, and after merely 6 months stepped down. The power went back to the Rump Parliament, who in communication with Charles II, son of Charles I, invited him back to be monarch on the conditions that he would not harm anyone except those who contributed to the deaths of his father. And so began the Restoration Monarchy of 1660, which will be discussed in the next video, which will be the second part of this series about the 17th century Britain. Thank you for watching. Thank you for 300 subscribers, really appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment and click the subscribe button, and I shall see you next time.